our next guest, Gordon Chang. He is the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. He's also on Twitter at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, good to have you with us, sir.
Thank you so much, Vince.
What's happening here? How seriously should we take Xi Jinping not appearing at this G20 summit?
We don't know what's happening. Everyone says that Xi Jinping is not going to India because he wants to snub Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister. And that's possibly true. But I'm glad that you pointed out that the Ministry of State Security about 24 hours ago issued that statement, which hinted that Xi Jinping may not go to the APEC summit in San Francisco in November, which means that maybe Xi Jinping is not in travel mode. And by the way, at this moment, he's not in Jakarta for the ASEAN summit, which he might have attended. So really what we've got right now is, I think, a Chinese leader who's at home. He is, I think, worried about leaving China because there are so many problems. And he very well may think that he might not be entitled to come back to China if he were to leave, for instance, for New Delhi.
How about that? So this isn't a commentary necessarily on the relationship between the United States and China. It could be more about volatility inside of his own country.
Yes. As I said, we don't know. But I don't think that it really makes sense for Xi Jinping to sort of flip the middle finger to Narendra Modi at this particular time. We do know that Xi Jinping has been criticized by Communist Party elders for taking the country too far in the wrong direction. That occurred last month, according to some reports. We also know of high-level turbulence. There are rumors circulating around Beijing, which the rumors are probably not true, but the fact that the rumors are there suggests that someone's trying to destabilize China's leader, and the fact that those rumors are permitted to circulate on social media indicates that someone really does want to do in China's leader.
When you hear that Chinese spy agencies suggest that the United States needs to demonstrate sufficient sincerity towards China and Xi Jinping, what does that mean to you? What are they referencing?
Well, they're probably talking about a number of things the Biden administration has done which they don't like. So, for instance, the chip rules of last October. And also there have been minor sanctions imposed on China. And even the smallest of these costs irritate Beijing to no end, because they believe that they're the center of the world. They have a right to rule the solar system. And I'm not exaggerating, by the way, because Chinese officials talk about the moon and Mars as sovereign Chinese territory. But putting that aside, we have a political system in China right now that believes that everyone owes allegiance to Beijing. And by the way, Biden is responsible in part for creating that impression because he has sent 4 of his senior officials to China and has not requested a return visit from a senior Chinese official to Washington. So Biden is basically telling Xi Jinping, look, I believe that the United States is a supplicant to China because I'm not insisting on what is normal, which would be a return visit.
Right. He's projecting weakness by not expecting, basically, as they would say, equitable treatment.
Yes, and this is unprecedented to send 4 senior officials without a return visit. So, Xi Jinping reasonably thinks that Biden believes that he's a vassal, that the United States owes allegiance to China. And while we Americans may think that sounds ludicrous, these Chinese officials right now have gone off the deep end.
One of the other pieces of Biden's relationship with China that stands out, other than, obviously the bribes flowing to his family, is the green energy economy seems to be almost entirely dependent on goods that are made in China. How intertwined is Biden's so-called green energy agenda and the Chinese government?
Well, so very much, as you point out. I mean, virtually all the solar panels in the world are made in Xinjiang or with materials from Xinjiang. And that means, as a Los Angeles-based NGO pointed out, almost all of the solar panels in the world are made with forced or slave labor. Biden knows this. It's illegal to bring those products into the U.S. That's the Tariff Act of 1930, plus the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act of 2021. But Biden is bringing them in anyway through subterfuges. Chinese know what's going on, and so they look at Biden and saying he's not willing to enforce his own basic law. This is one of the basic laws of the United States. You cannot import forced enslaved labor products into America, and yet Biden is doing it. And basically what he's saying is, yeah, we need China's green energy products.
It's amazing, isn't it? And they give us all these lectures on American history and slavery and everything else. And meanwhile, their agenda is being propped up by a reliance on forced labor.
Yeah, and by the way, let's remember this forced labor is part of a program of genocide and other crimes against humanity, the worst atrocities the world has seen since the Third Reich. So I don't want any lectures from the President of the United States about slavery or racial discrimination or anything, because if you're supporting genocide, then you have put yourself beyond the pale.
Let's stay on the issue of China for a moment. The Wall Street Journal has a report this week headlined, Chinese gatecrashers at U.S. bases spark espionage concerns. The piece goes on to detail hundreds of occasions upon which Chinese foreign nationals have attempted to enter U.S. military bases, sometimes successfully. And among the efforts that they've made include claims as they arrive at the gate that they were being led to McDonald's or Burger King by their Google Maps, or that there were other incidents where people just pushed past the guards, including at Fort Wainwright, Alaska, and to get onto the base. And the article claims that this is an intelligence gathering exercise and that many of the Chinese nationals who are doing this are doing it under duress as their government back home is promising negative outcomes for their families if they don't abide. What else can you tell us here?
Well, if we had one or two incidents, you could say, well, maybe that's just accident. But when you have 100, which is what the Wall Street Journal is talking about, which is based on a leak from senior administration officials, then it's a pattern. And it means essentially that we are being overwhelmed. The FBI is overwhelmed. Other federal law enforcement agencies are overwhelmed. States are overwhelmed, which means that we have a serious issue with Chinese nationals and Chinese entities in our country. And if we don't start dealing with this effectively, which I believe means expelling many of them, then we are going to lose our country. Remember, there's that Fresno lab that had about 1,000 mice that have been genetically engineered to transmit disease. It was a Chinese operation. That means that they were thinking of killing even more Americans. So let's understand what's going on here. And I know that people get squeamish about this, but remember, every Chinese national is under a legal compulsion to commit espionage against the United States. Every Chinese national, because of the Communist Party's top-down system, is under a compulsion to commit acts of sabotage against the United States. We're not going to keep our country unless we deal with this.
It certainly seems that way. I was talking to Philip Lenzicki over at the Daily Caller News Foundation this past week, and we were discussing how there's a company that is in Michigan. The Chinese parent company is Gotion, and they are set to build 2 electric battery plants now in Michigan with the blessing of the Biden administration. And Philip has just obtained video of many of the employees of that parent company going on a field trip to various communist landmarks in China and making a pledge to join the Communist Party and to work for its goals as long as they live and promise never to betray the party. This sounds exactly like what you're talking about.
Yes, and if you go on X, formerly Twitter, you can see pictures of those employees dressed in Maoist uniforms. Philip has done great work. Another story that he did was he detailed how there are at least 7 and maybe 9 other Chinese police stations in the U.S. that the Biden administration has not closed. Yes, they closed the one in New York's Chinatown, but there are many more still that are operating.
Gordon Chang, how vulnerable is the average Chinese national to being exploited while they're here in the United States by their own government for espionage purposes?
Well, if anyone loves their relatives and their relatives are in China, then they're extremely subject to demands of the Communist Party. And that's the reason why we have so many cases of Chinese nationals engaged in illegal activities in our country. And as remember, that's the nature of their system. So if we were to expel Chinese nationals, this is not racism. This is just a recognition of the Chinese system that requires them legally to commit acts of espionage. So we have to understand that our society is now at great risk. we have all of these saboteurs, I believe, coming into our country across the southern border. Most Chinese nationals who are escaping their country are who they say they are. They have given up on China. But we also know that there are people, extremely suspicious people, coming across that border. Packs of 5 to 15 of Chinese males, unattached to family groups,
yes,
pretending not to speak English, and are known to have Chinese military links.
Well, it strikes me that the thing we were talking about a little bit earlier, the identity politics obsession of the left, is actually preventing us from having a realistic debate on this subject. It's almost like if you even bring it up, that you're engaging in an act of bigotry, even though you're raising legitimate concerns.
Absolutely, and we got to remember that if you, if you're a leftist and you raise those issues, then you're yourself a racist, because you're saying that because of racism, we should not defend the United States. That is just wrong. We have to understand, under the Chinese system, as I mentioned, every Chinese national in the United States is under compulsion to commit crimes, and that is a fact.
And you're not overstating it.
No. The Article 7 and 14 of China's 2017 National Intelligence Law requires every Chinese national to commit acts of espionage if required by a relevant authority of China, almost a direct quote. And under the Communist Party's top-down system, nobody can resist the demand from the Communist Party. So that is, that's there. And if you say we're not going to defend ourselves because of the race of the people who are, required to destroy the United States, well, then that's racism.
Yes, indeed. Let me move to North Korea now. North Korea news this week, in fact, today. The United States said Monday that it expects North Korean leader Kim Jong Un to make a rare trip abroad, I assume with his private toilet on the flying in to Russia. President Vladimir Putin is set to meet with him. They're going to talk about arms for Moscow's war in Ukraine. What do you make of this news?
Yeah, probably in Vladivostok and probably on Kim Jong Un's armored train. So yes, he will have the private toilet, but it will not be in the air. And what we are seeing, though, is the congealing of a new axis. That axis is led by China, has North Korea and Russia in it, and they are working together. And Russia just a few hours ago announced that North Korea has been invited to participate in joint naval exercises with China and Russia. So we are seeing, a lot of Americans say, I don't want a Cold War. Well, it's already there, and we're just not defending ourselves.
Gordon Chang, as always, great analysis. You can find Gordon Chang on Twitter, now X, at Gordon G. Chang. Sir, thank you very much.